Let me back up for a second. We had just moved into what was supposed to be a peaceful, upscale community in suburban Georgia, a place where the trees were old, the sidewalks were new, and the gossip was deadly. The kind of place where everyone's front lawn is measured in square feet, but their egos are measured in square miles. Now I'm no stranger to HOAs. I grew up hearing horror stories from my father, a Vietnam vet who once had to fight an HOA board for the right to fly an American flag on his own porch. So trust me, I thought I knew what I was getting into. I didn't enter Karen. Not a Karen, the Karen queen of the HOA. She wasn't just a rule follower. Oh no, she was the self-appointed sheriff of neighborhood morality. And boy, did she love finding new ways to remind everyone that she was in charge. At first, it was little things. Passive-aggressive notes about our non-regulation mailbox because apparently the HOA bylaws required it to be painted subdued beige. And mine was a shocking, rebellious off-white warnings about our front bushes being excessively lush. A $50 fine because my son parked his 1999 Ford Ranger slightly outside the edge of our driveway line. We're talking 3 inches, folks. I measured it. I tried to laugh it off. Pick your battles, my wife said. But Karen wasn't satisfied with warning letters and passive-aggressive emails. Oh no. Karen decided that the only way to truly enforce the HOA's unwritten aesthetic standards was to hire herself a private enforcer. A man who, I kid you not, wore a knockoff security uniform from Amazon, complete with a fake badge that said, Community Officer. No, not an actual HOA security team, not a licensed professional, literally a random guy. Karen paid under the table. And that's when things got dangerous. One Sunday afternoon, sunny quiet with birds chirping, my 15-year-old son was out front helping me trim the hedges. That's when this community officer swaggered up our driveway like he was starring in some low-budget cop drama. First, he shouted at my son for unauthorized landscaping activity. Then when my kid didn't immediately drop the hedge trimmers and assume the position, the guy drew a loaded handgun. On my son, yeah, over hedges because apparently in Karen's kingdom, long grass was a felony. Now listen, my boy's a good kid, he's smart. Polite has never so much as gotten a detention, and now he's staring down the barrel of some lunatic's pistol because the azaleas were too vigorous for community standards. I heard the shouting from inside the garage when I ran out and saw that gun pointed at my boy. Let me tell you something. Ancient inside me snapped, but I kept my cool barely. Instead of escalating it, I calmly pulled out my phone and called 911. Meanwhile, some of the neighbor ladies were already filming the whole thing on their iPads, like it was dinner theater. When the real police arrived, sirens wailing, tires screeching, Karen came running out of her McMansion, shrieking about how we were disturbing the community order. You know, the order she manufactured out of thin air, and that's when things got real interesting. Turns out, impersonating a law enforcement officer is a felony in Georgia, and threatening a minor with a firearm. That's another. Let's just say Karen's private cop wasn't nearly as tough when he was face down on the asphalt in handcuffs, and Karen tried to wriggle out of it, blamed it all on miscommunication, said she, only meant for him to issue warnings, claimed she had no idea he was armed. Spoiler alert, she knew I had the emails to prove it. But that's a story for part 2, and trust me, you're going to want to see how that courtroom showdown turned out. Let's just say justice showed up late, but it came dressed in a badge and carrying a big fat warrant. If you thought seeing Karen's fake community officer getting arrested was satisfying, just buckle up because the ride was far from over. The real storm was just beginning. Less than 24 hours after the incident, my wife and I were sitting in our living room when we heard the soft slap of papers hitting our front door. Yep, Karen served us. Not personally, of course, she had the HOA's official courier. Basically, her teenage nephew with a clipboard slap, a cease and desist letter on our door. According to the letter, we were in violation of multiple HOA regulations, aggressive behavior toward community officials, unauthorized filming of security personnel, public endangerment of neighborhood aesthetics. They were seriously trying to fine us $500 per day until we restored visual harmony. Meanwhile, Karen's security officer was sitting in a county jail on 2 felony charges. You can't make this stuff up. But here's the thing, Karen didn't know who she was dealing with. My wife, she's a real estate attorney. I spent 22 years in municipal government before retiring. We knew every inch of the HOA bylaws, and more importantly, we knew which parts of their charter were legally binding and which parts were just hot air. Plus, remember those security cameras I mentioned earlier? Yeah, they caught everything. Crystal clear footage of the fake HOA cop pulling his weapon, Karen directing him behind the scenes, practically stage managing the whole encounter. Karen laughing when my son put his hands up in fear. By the next morning, I had the footage burned onto 3 separate thumb drives and mailed them straight to our local police department, the district attorney's office, and a very, very curious local news station. Let's just say the 6 o'clock news had a field day. Suburban HOA chair caught on tape, orchestrating armed intimidation. Karen's carefully crafted image as protector of the community crumbled faster than a stale cookie at a church bake sale. For the first few days, there was tension so thick you could slice it with a butter knife. Some neighbors, the ones who had been Karen's loyal lapdogs, tried to spin it. They said I was exaggerating, that boys will be boys, that Karen was just trying to maintain standards. But the video didn't lie, and neither did the court summons that soon landed in Karen's mailbox. Within a week, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. I attended, not because I had to, but because I wanted to look Karen dead in the eye. When the walls finally closed in, the meeting was packed. Old-timers who had lived here for decades, young couples trying to raise their kids in peace. Even the local councilman showed up just to see the fireworks. Karen sat at the head table still trying to act like she was in charge, but you could see the panic under her powdery smile. First, she tried to minimize everything, claimed she only hired the officer for deterrence purposes, said she never authorized the use of force, said it was all a tragic misunderstanding. Then I stood up, walked to the projector screen, and popped in the footage. The room went dead silent. Every second of her scheming, every giggle, every lie, projected 6 feet wide in glorious 880p. After the meeting, the HOA board had no choice. Karen was immediately suspended pending investigation. But that wasn't the end of it. Remember that cease and desist letter? Yeah, that backfired. Because once Karen tried to use an HOA violation as a legal weapon, she opened the door for me to countersue for emotional distress, false accusations, harassment, and endangerment of a minor. I didn't just file a personal lawsuit. I filed a class action on behalf of half the neighborhood, dozens of families who had been bullied, fined, and manipulated by Karen for years. And the cherry on top, turns out Karen had been misappropriating HOA funds. We found receipts for administrative dinners at 5-star restaurants, personal security expenses, and even a community enrichment trip to Las Vegas. You know, all very necessary for policing mailbox colors. Obviously, the DA's office launched a formal investigation. By the time Karen stepped into the courtroom, she was facing multiple civil suits, criminal charges for fraud and impersonation, and the very real possibility of losing her house to legal fees. Justice. It doesn't always wear a cape. Sometimes it wears a business suit and carries a subpoena. The day Karen lost her final court appeal was a beautiful spring afternoon. Pink dogwoods were blooming. Kids were riding bikes up and down the block, and for the first time in months, there was no screaming from Karen's front porch. Instead, there was just Karen standing on her lawn in her designer heels, sobbing into her cell phone, watching as a sheriff's deputy stapled a foreclosure notice to her front door. She tried to rant on Facebook, of course, blamed cancel culture, the deep state, even the satanic overreach of suburban communists. Her words, not mine. Nobody cared. The community voted unanimously to expel her from the HOA board, ban her from attending any future meetings, and rescind all the ridiculous regulations she had put in place. Front yards blossomed in every color of the rainbow. People finally parked pickup trucks in driveways without fear. Someone even put a pink flamingo lawn ornament right in front of Karen's old house, a final little middle finger to her reign of terror. As for us, we threw a massive block party. We smoked brisket, played country music until midnight, and toasted every family Karen had tried to bully into silence. For the first time in a long time, it felt like home. It started about 3 months after the foreclosure. The neighborhood had finally settled into a kind of peaceful, happy rhythm. Front lawns were vibrant again. The HOA board had been replaced by a rotating team of actual volunteers, people who actually cared about community, not just control. Life was good till I saw a familiar SUV, a pearl white Lexus with a bumper sticker that said, "Respect authority," slowly cruising the neighborhood. At first, I thought maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe someone new had bought her old car at auction. Nope. It was Karen alive, bitter and plotting. She didn't live in the neighborhood anymore. Her credit was so shot she couldn't even qualify for a rent to own in a neighboring county. Instead, she was crashing on her sister's couch 2 towns over. But somehow that did not stop her from showing up at our HOA meetings. Oh yes, even without property ownership, even without any legal standing. Karen marched into the meetings uninvited and tried to advise us on proper community standards. The gall, the unmitigated gall. At first, the new board tried to handle her politely. They reminded her kindly that attendance at meetings was restricted to current homeowners or authorized tenants. They offered to send her the new bylaws via email. Karen refused. She sat there arms crossed, nose in the air, like a dethroned queen waiting to reclaim her imaginary crown. She interrupted speakers. She corrected grammar on proposals. She even tried to motion for a vote on restoring uniform mailbox colors. Yes, still obsessed about mailboxes. Finally, the board had to call security. Real security, this time to escort her out. Karen made a scene, of course. Accused the board of discrimination, ageism, gender bias, deep state, conspiracy, you name it. All caught on video by half a dozen smartphones. That footage ended up circulating online under the title, Karen tries to overthrow HOA she doesn't even live in. It racked up over 2 million views in under a week. After her public humiliation, you'd think Karen would learn. You'd be wrong since she couldn't attack us legally. Karen went for petty sabotage. She started filing anonymous noise complaints against block parties, reporting unauthorized structures like swing sets and bird baths to the county zoning office, sending handwritten letters to local businesses warning them about our problematic community. Yes, handwritten letters in cursive, on pink stationery. I'm telling you, if Karen had put half as much energy into therapy as she did into revenge, she could have cured cancer by now. It all came to a head during our annual 4th of July block party. We had food trucks, a dunk tank, fireworks, the whole 9 yards. People were laughing, kids running wild music blasting from rented speakers. It was the best turnout the neighborhood had ever seen. And right in the middle of it, Karen showed up, dressed head to toe in red, white, and blue, carrying a clipboard. She started going around telling vendors they needed special HOA permits, demanded some parents register their children for safety compliance, tried to tell the ice cream truck driver he needed to move because he was violating parade formation standards. There was no parade, by the way. Vendors were confused, parents were annoyed, kids were scared. Finally, one brave mom, a retired Army sergeant, calmly walked over, took Karen's clipboard and dropped it straight into a trash can. Karen shrieked like she had been stabbed. She called the police claiming mass disobedience and community rioting. The police came and immediately recognized her. One officer literally rolled his eyes and said, "Oh, it's you again." They didn't arrest Karen, but they did issue her an official trespassing warning. One more incident and she would face actual jail time. Karen left sobbing into her American flag scarf. After the block party disaster, Karen finally became radioactive. Nobody, and I mean nobody, wanted anything to do with her. She tried to start a Facebook group called Real Residents Against HOA Corruption. It had 3 members, Karen, her sister, and some poor guy from Nebraska who thought it was a support group for farming regulations. She tried to organize community walks through the neighborhood. Only 2 people showed up, and one of them was just walking. Their dog. Eventually Karen faded into obscurity. Last I heard, she was living in a trailer park 2 counties over, still complaining about how the world had conspired against her greatness. As for us, the neighborhood thrived. We planted gardens, hosted open mic nights, even painted our mailboxes in wild colors, just to celebrate freedom. Kids rode bikes without being interrogated. Block parties became the highlight of the year. New families moved in, drawn by the real sense of community we had rebuilt. Not the fake control-obsessed community Oren had tried to create. It wasn't perfect. No place is. But it was home, a real one. Not because of rules or threats, but because people finally remembered how to live together like neighbors should. If you thought Karen was done, if you thought getting humiliated, evicted, and publicly roasted would finally put her out to pasture, well, you clearly underestimate the sheer stubbornness of a Karen, because somehow she found a way to make things even worse. The Patriot Parade plot, it all started with a Facebook post. Some random Tuesday morning, just as people were settling into their work week, Karen announced publicly that she would be leading a patriotic protest march through her former neighborhood to reclaim traditional American values. She called it the Freedom Parade, scheduled for Sunday, no permits, no permission, and definitely no community support. Most of us figured it was just another empty threat. Maybe she'd drive by, honk a horn, scream into the void a little bit. We underestimated her because this time Karen had props. The grand entrance Sunday afternoon rolled around, Families were out walking bongs, kids were riding scooters, the ice cream truck was making its usual rounds. And then the unmistakable sound of a poorly maintained riding lawnmower echoed down the main street. At first, nobody knew what it was. Then we saw it, Karen, riding an ancient sputtering John Deere mower, American flags duct taped to the sides, wearing a glittering red, white, and blue jumpsuit that looked like it had been stolen from a low-budget 4th of July pageant. Behind her, 3 chihuahuas, all wearing tiny freedom fighter bandanas, frantically yipping and chasing after the mower. In one hand, Karen clutched a tiki torch like it was the Olympic flame. She wasn't just parading, she was staging a full-blown one-woman revolution. At first, people just stood there, mouths hanging open. Some neighbors grabbed their phones. Some hurried their kids inside. One poor guy dropped his groceries right on the sidewalk and just stared Karen cruise at a whopping 3 miles per hour down the middle of the street, waving the tiki torch and shouting things like, "Take back our streets," "Restore lawn uniformity," "Down with garden gnomes." Yes, apparently she had declared war on decorative lawn ornaments. Now, the dogs barked. The lawnmower sputtered. The tiki torch dripped little trails of lighter fluid along the road. It was glorious and horrifying, like watching a bald eagle try to tap dance. Karen made it about halfway down the block before the inevitable happened. The lawnmower, never meant to drive on pavement, started overheating. Smoke poured out from under the seat. The tiki torch, already leaking fluid, caught a stray spark. Suddenly, whoosh! A burst of flame shot up from the back of the mower. Karen screamed. The dogs scattered. She jumped off the mower mid-roll, landing hard on the asphalt, and scrambled away on her hands and knees, still clutching the flaming tiki torch. The mower kept rolling for another 20 feet, straight into the Hendersons' prize rose garden. Those roses had won awards. They were basically the crown jewels of the neighborhood. The mower came to a smoldering stop, crushing 3 bushes and setting off the Hendersons' new motion sensor sprinkler system. A geyser of freezing water blasted into the air, soaking everything: Karen, the mower, the dogs, the street. It would have been tragic if it wasn't so absurd. By then, half the neighborhood was outside filming with their phones. Karen, drenched and screeching, tried to rally her troops, which at this point consisted of exactly herself, 3 very wet, confused chihuahuas, and a half-burnt tiki torch. That's when the police rolled up. Same 2 officers who had dealt with her during the 4th of July fiasco. One of them just sighed and said, "Well, if it isn't our favorite neighborhood revolutionary." Karen immediately launched into a rant about her constitutional right to protest against lawn decor tyranny. The officers very patiently explained that setting unauthorized fires, endangering public property, trespassing, and operating an unlicensed vehicle on a public street are not protected under the First Amendment. Karen was cited for reckless endangerment, destruction of property, operating a vehicle without registration, and unlawful open flame. The lawnmower was impounded. The chihuahuas were taken to a local shelter. They were fine and frankly looked relieved. And Karen? Karen was gently but firmly escorted away in the back of a squad car for the 3rd time that year. The best part: after the incident, the Hendersons, ever the optimists, turned their ruined rose garden into a tiny community memorial. They put up a wooden sign that read, "Here lies the last stand of Karen May. Her tiki torch burned forever in infamy." It became a bit of a tourist spot. People would stroll by, chuckle, take selfies with the sign. Local kids nicknamed the burn spot Karen's Crater. Someone even painted a little toy lawnmower and placed it there as a tribute. For the first time in a long time, the entire community was truly bonded, not by rules or threats, but by shared laughter and resilience. We had survived the Karen-pocalypse. And honestly, we were stronger and a whole lot happier because of it. About 2 weeks after her lawnmower meltdown, a letter arrived at the HOA office. It wasn't handwritten this time. Oh no. Karen had leveled up. This letter was typed complete with official-looking letterhead that said, Karen S. Larson, citizen advocate for community integrity. The irony nearly knocked me out of my chair. Inside was a formal notice of intent to sue against the HOA board, individual board members, yes, by name, the neighborhood at large, 2 specific houses she claimed had emotional triggering decor, and my personal favorite, any and all canines associated with the Freedom Party of July 4th. Yes, Karen was trying to sue the neighborhood dogs. Karen's list of grievances. The letter came with a 9-page statement of grievances, which included, and I swear I'm not making this up, demand number 1, immediate reinstatement to the HOA board with lifetime executive authority. Demand number 2, $500, $1,000 in emotional damages for unlawful social shunning. Demand number 3. A written apology notarized from every household that cheered during her arrest. Demand number 4. The immediate removal of all lawn ornaments not pre-approved by a licensed esthetician. Demand number 5. A community-funded lifetime supply of nacho cheese because, and I quote, comfort food is a human right under the Geneva Conventions. Oh, and the scented candles. Apparently, Karen had decided that certain unauthorized aromas, like Mrs. Patel's lavender candles and the Morrison's pumpkin spice porch decor, had caused her severe allergic distress. She demanded a total ban on all scented products in the neighborhood. You can't make this stuff up. If you pitched it as a TV script, they'd tell you it was too ridiculous. Now, normally the HOA board might have just ignored it, but Karen, in her infinite wisdom, had actually filed the paperwork through a free online legal service, meaning it was technically official, even if it had no legal merit whatsoever. We had to respond. Fortunately, our new HOA president was a retired judge. You better believe after everything we went through, we handpicked that leadership. He handled it beautifully. Filed a motion to dismiss within 24 hours, cited about 15 different cases establishing Karen's claims as frivolous, and countersued for court costs and damages due to harassment. The court date was set for the following month. In the meantime, Karen continued her activism from jail. She managed to start a petition among inmates demanding prison yard beautification. It failed, filed 2 more handwritten grievances against her cellmate for scented shampoo usage. Write a 4-page manifesto titled The Declaration of Lawn Independence, which she tried to mail to local newspapers. Someone eventually leaked it online. It went viral. Highlights included a section about constitutional rights to symmetrical shrubbery. Karen truly believed she was a political prisoner, and in a weird way, she kinda was. Just not for the reasons she thought. Court day finally arrived. Half the neighborhood showed up to watch. It was standing room only. People brought folding chairs, lawn chairs, even coolers with sodas, like it was a tailgate party. Karen was led into the courtroom in an ill-fitting gray jumpsuit, still clutching her manifesto and several crumpled notes. She tried to represent herself badly. She opened her statement by quoting the preamble to the Constitution, then immediately launched into a 15-minute rant about garden gnomes being tools of subversion. The judge, a very patient woman who looked like she had seen it all, listened politely. Then, with the calm efficiency of someone stamping an envelope, she dismissed Karen's lawsuit with prejudice, meaning Karen couldn't refile it. Ordered Karen to pay court fees, increased her existing fines for harassment, banned her from setting foot within 500 feet of the neighborhood for 5 years. The final cherry on top. As Karen was being escorted out, one of the Chihuahuas, who had since been adopted by a kind family down the block, let out a triumphant little bark. Perfect timing. Since then, things have only gotten better. The Karen Memorial Rose Garden became a permanent feature. People donated garden gnomes, hundreds of them, and now the once quiet little patch is a riot of whimsical, brightly painted statues. There's even an annual Freedom Party now. Every 4th of July, complete with a lawnmower parade, safe ones, no tiki torches, live music, and a Chihuahua costume contest. Karen, she's reportedly moved 3 states away, tried to run for a local HOA position there, lost by a landslide. Guess word travels fast. As for us, we're thriving. We've learned to laugh. We've learned to stand together, and most importantly, we've learned never to underestimate the power of a few good neighbors armed with patience cameras and a whole lot of stubborn love. After everything we'd been through, the lawsuits, the lawnmower parade, the tiki torch incident, you'd think our neighborhood had earned the right to a little peace and quiet, and for a while we did. Until this year's 4th of July Freedom Party, when someone unexpected showed up. And no, it wasn't another Karen wannabe. It was Karen herself, but trust me, this wasn't the return anyone expected. The 4th of July that year was bigger than ever. 3 food trucks, a full brass band playing patriotic classics, face-painting fireworks, bouncy houses, the whole 9 yards. People came from neighboring communities just to see the famous HOA that survived Karen. Kids ran wild in red, white, and blue t-shirts. Neighbors toasted hot dogs over open grills. There was even a dunk tank featuring our beloved HOA president, who gamely took every plunge with a big laugh. It felt right, like we'd finally truly moved on. Until just before the fireworks show, I was standing by the lemonade table when I saw her, at the far end of the block, standing awkwardly under a street lamp, holding what looked like a store-bought pie. Karen But she looked different. Gone was the fiery flag-waving revolutionary. No more shouting, no clipboard, no riding lawnmower, just Karen alone, holding a pie, and maybe for the first time ever looking uncertain. A few people noticed her. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Was she here to cause trouble? Sue someone? Stage another protest? You could feel the tension rise like a taut wire ready to snap. The brass band faltered slightly. Kids stopped mid-run, sensing the adults' sudden unease. For a long moment, nobody moved. Karen shifted her weight from foot to foot. She looked down at the pie, then back at the crowd. Then, unbelievably, she started walking toward us, slowly, carefully. Almost sheepishly, I braced myself. Karen stopped a few feet from the main tent. She cleared her throat, and then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I caused a lot of hurt. I wasn't a good neighbor. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I wasn't. I'm sorry. Silence, absolute silence, even the Chihuahuas. Yes, some of them had come to the party, and little Uncle Sam had stopped barking. Karen looked down, hands trembling around the pie tin. It wasn't much. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was something. For a second, nobody knew what to do. Then little Ellie Harper, 7 years old, missing her 2 front teeth and completely immune to adult drama, marched right up to Karen and said, Is that pie for us? Karen blinked, nodded. Ellie grabbed the pie, held it aloft like a trophy and shouted, Pie time! And just like that, the spell was broken. People laughed. The band picked up again. The kids swarmed the dessert table. Karen stood there looking stunned as neighbors gently went back to enjoying themselves. No, nobody ran over to hug her. Nobody offered to let her back into the HOA, but nobody screamed at her either. Nobody called the cops, and maybe that was enough. Karen stayed for a little while. She ate a hot dog, watched the fireworks, talked quietly with a few old neighbors who were willing to listen. Then as the last sparkles of the grand finale faded into the night sky, she quietly slipped away. No drama, no shouting, no riding lawnmower. Just a woman who had, in her own awkward, clumsy way, tried to make peace. Looking back, it's easy to paint Karen as the villain. And to be fair, for a while she absolutely was, but sometimes villains aren't born. They're made by loneliness, by fear, by the desperate need to control something, anything in a world that feels out of control. That doesn't excuse her actions, it doesn't erase the chaos, but maybe it explains it, and maybe that tiny, messy, awkward apology under a street lamp was the best she could give. Sometimes that has to be enough.